Today I'm speaking to Dr. D.M.A. Kulasooriya, who is the Director General at National Institute of Business Management, better known as NIBM. Thank you for joining us on this very special interview. Now, we are talking about generations. I fall into one generation, you may fall into different generation, and it's quite interesting how different generations see the world differently, and especially see the education and what they have to offer differently. So to speak to us more about it, of course, I have Doctor joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're very keen in uplifting generations that are forward thinking. Tell me about this battle of the generations.
Yes, of course, it's a very nice question that you're asking, and this Generation C is the fully digitalized generation, and now we are working with them, of course, and in my case, I belong to Generation X, and probably you are in Y, and this is the Generation Z we call it. Generally, we call it a Generation C.
Okay.
And that is how we differentiate generations.
I would like to stay in Generation Z.
Yeah, of course, Generation C
Mindset.
is doing very well,
Yeah.
and they are moving fast, and they do a lot of things nowadays. And when you compare with Gen X like ours, and it's really they are doing very well, and they go into different aspects which we have not seen earlier on.
Yeah, true. Because I think the earlier generations will recruit someone in the younger generation to handle their social media or to see their digital presence, which is remarkable because the younger generation seems to understand it so flawlessly. Tell me about education is something that has been very much an evolving subject throughout. Like what my mum learned for her O-levels and what I learned from O-levels were two different things. So we have always sort of changed with time. Today, when you approach these youngsters, what do you keep in mind when it comes to making education interesting?
Yeah, that's the main reason as to why we talk about this Gen Z. And most of the adults, parents and our teachers and lecturers, and they manage this Gen Z. But they were born into different generation. Now they are managing this new generation. So there's a huge gap between the Generation X and Generation C. So we need to fill this gap, and it's very difficult for us to manage that also. If you don't get yourself updated with the digital generation, what happens is naturally you think in a negative manner. So that's the issue we are having. So that's how we need to manage. But we have seen that most of the digitalized operation nowadays is moving fast, and the world need this type of generations. But at the same time, we are reluctant to give the full freedom for new generations to work with the industries and work with the schools and work with the universities. So that's the issue we are having. Now we are trying to tackle this issue.
Brilliant. Now, something that we really saw where I think the newer generation adapted to it so fast. With COVID-19, we were all forced to stay at home, work from home, study from home, do everything from home. And it was very hard for some people to adapt to that because they lost their routine, they lost their process of going into office or going into school. But this generation found it so easy. And how did you, as someone who is also championing an institute, how was it for you to sort of merge that in today's life?
Again, I would like to talk about this because most of the parents would like to see that they are move away from the mobile phone, and they always think that Gen Z is making use of these phones in a different way, negative way. So, but we found that just after the pandemic, and most of the students or Gen Z, and they are fully operational with this digital operation. So as a result, they would be able to come up with the digital campus.
Okay.
So it's easy for them to cope up with this situation, basically because they are very much conversant with this. But all the others, of course, they had to struggle, and we need to train them. And even some of the time, even adults, we need to train them. Now we have seen this, it's an opportunity given by this pandemic.
To learn
now,
something.
yes, parents also now they are happy with, while their children are making use of these digital facilities.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this.
And as someone who is in the education field, even you have to evolve, like come to know new things and approach things differently. How do you keep up with time?
Yeah, that's a great question because we always, we been in the industry, and specifically, in this education industry, we need to get ourselves updated. And if you talk about the digital life, of course, we get ourselves updated every time. So that's the reason as to why we can understand our Gen Z properly, and we can work with them. There's no huge gap as such because we know the language what they're talking about.
What's
easily,
trending
yes,
and-
it's easily we can understand. So we are very happy with them, and I would say that maybe probably people don't understand this, and this new generation is much better than adults.
That's amazing.
So-
and for you to say it, that's a better thing because adults can't fight with adults. No.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, something I wanted to ask you, NIBM is championing something wonderful this year. You all really want to focus on happiness. And you know, when we had to approach studies, or when I had to sit for my masters, for me it was just struggle, like drag myself for class on a Saturday, study the whole day, complain, did the exam, complain, but we had to do it. But adding happiness into education is a beautiful art. How did you find this balance, and why this theme?
Yeah, as you know, this happiness is, true happiness is, is you are, living with yourself, and you are being happy with yourself, and you really, truly love with yourself. So that's the, true happiness. Is you can't get it from outside. So external factors won't help you to, get the real happiness in your life. So that's the reason I took this, and at the same time, there's a major reason as to why we are taking this theme for 2021, because 2020 was a pandemic period, and parents and the students had to go through a rigorous process because they had to adapt themselves to the situation. So we thought that actually they were not happy. In that sense, we thought about how to make them happy. So we need to teach them what is the meaning of happiness. So we need to train our students on the happiness. So how to get within yourself, you can build up that, rather than talking about the external factors.
True.
So that's the reason now we are doing lots of projects to make sure that they are going through this happiness process. And one project is, we have taken some of the students, selected some of the students. They have gone to see some families.
Okay.
And even with limited resources, they are being happy. So then they ask the questions back from them. So whether what we have a lot of resources, but they have limited resources. So they can see then how they are going to going through this process, and how we go through this process, and they understand the real true feeling of happiness. So that's what we want to make sure. This year we have been plan lots of projects to make sure that our students are happy, parents are happy, and this gives a real message to the whole country as a nation that we can live with all limited conditions, but being truly happy with yourself.
That's amazing. You know, something that we are all faced with today is social media. And I'm sure every student who walks in and out of this building has themselves on it. What are your thoughts about social media, and how best are we using it?
Yeah, of course, in here Sri Lanka, when you think about the global setup, and here in Sri Lanka we just started making use of our social media.
Yeah, to the fullest.
Yes, it's not to the fullest, but if you take the case of education also, we have given a lot of courses on this, and we are training our students on this. It's not way of life here in Sri Lanka. I don't think that we have utilized all the resources available in digital universe for us to make use of it for the betterment of our nation. So it's high time for us to inculcate these ideas in the minds of our students, so that their life is easier, and you can reach large number of people all over the universe. You know, even if you take the case of NIBM, and we have a challenge for our teachers as well, because there are lots of teachers coming in YouTube now. So sometimes they are better than our teachers. So we have a challenge now. How we are going to make sure that we are better than them. So we need to go this now. The teachers are universal.
True.
Not locally made.
Yeah.
And we can't talk about those things. So now students can approach in different settings, and they have learning facilities.
Across the
different
world.
Platforms are different.
Yeah, true.
So that's the beauty of this. I think there's a lot to do in terms of social media, and make use of them for the betterment of the country.
You know, sometimes entrepreneurship is a big thing. And I think Sri Lanka is a country that really thrives with ideas. You know, every idea has somehow grown into something. Like, we have apps today to wash your clothes. You have apps today to even sort out a problem in your house. A plumbing issue can be sorted out by staying at home. And these are all local entrepreneurs who come forward. What are your thoughts about going outside and breaking away from the 9-to-5 system and starting your own job or starting your own platform? Do you encourage that?
Yes, of course. Here at NIBM, our theme is very clear. We always, tell our learners that you should be a producer of jobs rather than seeking jobs.
Okay.
So that's the major, platform we are talking about. That's the major theme that we have gone through. And we have a model called TDF. T stand for, thinking. Through thinking, you can produce great ideas. D means it's the doing part, the execution. It's no point of producing ideas and if you are not executing it. And we have lots of people who produce ideas, and finally nothing will happen. And final thing is you need to get them into the real situation and you need to produce quality production services. So that is a finishing part. So that's how we stand for our whole academic management system is based on this TDF model. Thinking, doing and finishing. So that's the whole process. And if you go through this whole process, you can start your own startups easily. So you don't want to depend on this. But one of the major quality of this Gen Z is that they want to have their own startup rather than working with the boss.
Yeah, true.
With
they want to be
someone
boss.
else.
Yeah.
They want to be their own boss. So we are encouraging it because it's good for our country.
Yeah, it's good
they
for
produce
the economy.
employments, and they go for different production services which with the affordable price. And that's a great thing that we always encourage rather than working with someone else. Better work with yourself, enjoy yourself and get the real happiness of your life.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to have an approach not only as someone who is running an institution or operating it, but also from an element of from a fatherly guidance or a guardian's guidance, because it's very important, because sometimes when you get into an education system you just don't know what to do with your qualification. Now when it comes to choices, Sri Lanka is still growing on the choices.
Yes.
Back in the days people never thought of going into, few years ago, even when you get into advertising they're like, really? Because they wanted the mainstream jobs, and if you say you want to get into fashion designing, it's another extreme.
Yes.
So there are all these opportunities today. How important it is for parents to let their children follow their passion?
Yeah, that's a good question. That the first thing I would like to touch upon one thing, that if you take the case of education, the most important, most of us, even here in Sri Lanka, we believe we wanted to, adults, especially they want to go for pre-education. So we are highlighting the fact that what is most important thing is the freedom of education, not the pre-education. So through that, there is a segment of the society that need to give facilities and all that and free of charge. But at the same time, we should talk about the choices. Freedom is really the choice. It's your own choice, and maybe you are good in fashion, maybe you are good in interior design, maybe you're good in IT, and that's what I want to do. But we have limited options here in Sri Lanka in the field of education. As a result, our students, they have their own creativity and their own thinking, but they had to go through some other courses, which is by force. And that should not be the case, because we should have our own, we have inherent and genetically we are born to certain qualities and at the same time skills. So we need to make sure that we are making use of these skills in our own area of operation. As a result, we can perform better.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really like your theme for this year. Seeking happiness through education is one of the biggest things that we can do, where you don't feel like you're actually locking yourself up in a room to study, but actually thriving in it and enjoying what you're doing. So when we commit ourselves to something. Before we close this interview, for those who are watching, the young generation, the old generation, the generation that's everywhere, what would you tell them? What has been your biggest reward in this education industry?
Yeah, that's the most important thing is education, because if you need to, when you looked at, you have a lot of qualifications and you have PhDs, masters, whatnot, all the degrees. But what is important is the education is basically you should be real humble, down to earth, go-getter in the real life.
True.
So that is what we need to, we need to develop our policies, and we need to getting this into different processes so that our citizens can go through the whole process and finally they can be happy in their life by doing something for their own life and for the generations, next generations. So you should be encouraged for them to mark in their life. So for that, of course, we need the real life educations and real practices, so that they will get into this and finally they will develop their own life with the true happiness.
Yeah.
So that's what we
Not
need.
only book smart, but also street smart.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so very much for being so wonderful and so transparent with your opinions and your thoughts and your views. I think all education areas should be as comfortable as this. I think we are changing, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the best part. So let's go ahead and support the generation that's building our country and who is going to be the future of our country. None of these are ours. It's always what we leave for others. And I think all these awards and these brilliant plaques that you see behind me is a testimony for what a brand and a person with substance can actually offer to this country. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And it has been absolutely a pleasure talking to you. So we'll see you with something amazing on Hi TV soon. Till then, you keep smiling. It's a wrap.